economy is the start and end of everything. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is the economy in limbo? We know the answer for that, of course. Are we waiting for a miracle to happen? Joining us this evening on the show to discuss all this and more are Felix Fernando, Executive Committee Member of the Joint Apparel Association Forum of Sri Lanka, Dr. Sarath Rajapathiran, Academic Chair, Advocata Institute, Dr. Anureka Nayaka, former Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. Also joining us via Zoom tonight on Face the Nation are Dr. W. Vijayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, as well as Mr. Chandra Jayaratna, former Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. Let's start off tonight's show with Dr. W. Vijayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Dr. Vijayawardena, we know now that there is a new governor who has taken office, that is Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, as well as there's a new secretary to the Ministry of Finance as well, Mr. Mahinda Siriwardena. Both of them have worked very closely with you over the years, and they are your colleagues as well. In your opinion, do you think the steps taken by both these gentlemen, in particular the governor of the central bank, Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, is on the right direction in terms of resurrecting the country's economy back again?
Well, Samir, I think he is on the right direction because at the very first board meeting, he had taken the decision to increase the interest rates in Sri Lanka because in the past, by both Lakshman and Cabral, they had been following a very low interest rate policy in order to stimulate the economy. But what actually happened, Samir, was that it had helped the government to borrow at a very cheap interest rate, but it hasn't helped any of the private sector entities to stimulate the economic activity. So as a result, what happened was there was a necessity to catch up with the interest rate along with the rising inflation in the economy. And the inflation has been rising because there had been a monetary explosion during the last 26-month period by about, say, 3,200 billion Sri Lanka rupees, so 41% increase. So because of this high monetary explosion, Samir, the inflation pressures were building up in the economy, and the interest rates were completely out of alignment with the going inflation rate. And therefore, the very first action which Nandalal has taken along with the Monetary Board to increase the interest rates had been actually in the correct direction, because it will first tame the inflation and also it will eliminate the black market for US dollars. I now find that previously in the black market, the premium was about, say, 60 to 70 rupees. But yesterday, the premium had come down to about 30 rupees. So with the rise in interest rates in the economy, there is no any incentive for anyone to keep this money out of Sri Lanka, and they will have to bring it back. And as a result, within a matter of, say, 2 to 3 months' time, the rupee will start stabilizing around the current level. So it's a good move, and in my view, it's in the right direction.
Dr. Vijayawardena, I want to drag your attention to the Monetary Board of Sri Lanka as well. Now, there's a lot of contention about former appointees being in the Monetary Board of Sri Lanka as well, and these individuals were the ones who were responsible to bringing down the country's economy to this state, especially with regard to printing money as well. If that case be the scenario as dictated by many political parties, including Dr. Harsha De Silva, who is an economist by himself, do you think this is the right move adopted by the governor of the central bank, the new governor of the central bank?
Well, of course, you know, the fate of the rupees that we are holding, Samir, is the responsibility of the board known as the Monetary Board. Many people think, you know, it's being done by the central bank, but central bank does not exist in the legal arena. It is the Monetary Board which has the legal personality and which has the corporate identity. And there are 5 people who have been entrusted with the task of protecting the money that we are holding. And I have to mention here they have miserably failed in the past in order to maintain the stability of the Sri Lanka rupee in the external side, and also to maintain the stability of the Sri Lanka rupee on the domestic side. As a result, we have all been to this, massive economic crisis, which is unprecedented in the entirety of the post-independence history of Sri Lanka. So the whole blame should go to Monetary Board, because very recently, Shamir, the Central Bank's Executive Officers Association, they have a news bulletin. In the news bulletin, they had made the announcement that the top technocrats and economists in the Central Bank had apprised the Monetary Board of the need for taking appropriate action with regard to the exchange rate, with regard to the interest rate policy, with regard to going to the to IMF to get an IMF bailout. But what they have charged is that the Monetary Board had paid a deaf ear to all the papers that they had submitted to the Monetary Board, and therefore they had blamed the Monetary Board for the current economic malaise. So I agree with you that the Monetary Board had been responsible for the current economic malaise, and they had to take the full responsibility for it.
If that case be the case in point, Dr. Wijewardena, don't you think the new governor of the central bank has to remove these members and appoint new members who have integrity to steer the country's economy in the right trajectory?
Samir, the appointment to the Monetary Board has been vested with the President of the Republic on the recommendation of the Minister of Finance. In that context, the Governor of the Central Bank has a very, little, voice on the particular issue. Even if he makes the recommendation, most probably the political authorities may have actually not listened to him. So it is up to the Minister of Finance and the President of the Republic to assess the past work of the Monetary Board members and find that, it is those Monetary Board members who have put the country in this particular economic crisis. So if the President is honest and if he can, lead this country in the future, one of the things that he has to do immediately is to assess the work that these Monetary Board members have done and take appropriate action to remove them. It's not up to the Governor of the Central Bank to do the job. It is up to the political authority, as well as it is up to people like you in the media and the civil society organizations to point it out to the President.
So ultimately, Dr. Wijewardena, just one final question before I move on to our other panelists. So ultimately, how it looks at the moment is the fact that, again, there is a lot of political decisions taking center stage, even at the central bank as we speak right now, because members who have been appointed to the Monetary Board are members who are appointed by the President, who has taken a political decision on this basis.
Yes, Samir, I had been arguing, all along that the appointment to the Monetary Board and also appointment to the Governor should be streamlined, and the nation has a right to demand from the political authorities as well as the parliamentarians like Harshad Silva. You must appoint the best people to all these, responsible positions. And for that purpose, there must be a selection process, and after that, there must be an election process. And all these things will have to be established, because in a bank, central bank like the Bank of Canada, they actually start looking for the post of governor 2 years before the incumbent governor retires. So these are things that we have to do with respect to bringing the governance to the administration of the central bank, and it's a long-term thing. And now Samir will have to agitate for that.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. W. Wijewardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Despite the fact the governor who was appointed recently to his post stating that he would take up a non-political role and would bring to the limelight if there are any political interference with regard to his role as the governor of the central bank, now has a major responsibility to play to ensure that the integrity of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka is well protected and is in the right direction to serve not political parties but the public of the country. I now move my attention to Dr. Sarath Rajapatrana, Academic Chair, Advocata Institute. Dr. Sarath Rajapatrana, when you were on this show a couple of months ago, you were very pessimistic about the country's economy, and today we are in this situation. Why? Because the government, the governor of the central bank at that time, Ajit Niwad Cabral, failed to listen to economists like you with regard to how to move the country in the right direction. What is this predicament that we are facing right now? Why are we in this dire situation? Is it because of political cronies who try to drag us down as a nation? Your time starts now.
Yeah, actually, I just want to remind myself, I spent 10 years in the central bank, as Dr. Vijayawardhan knows. Actually, that period, 1965 to 75, 10 years. We had never this conversation about cronyism or the monetary board. It was all working so very well, and we managed to do it then. Question then, what has changed now? Now, I have another little concern, that is that I know that Vijay is perfectly right about saying the monetary board's position. But you know, it takes off the responsibility from the governor. Because if you say the monetary board is doing that, that's a legal arrangement, I think there should be some type of a, reckoning of why we ended up with this situation. So I can begin by saying three things about it. First of all, the belief in some of the governors who before the new governor is in sort of very strange monetary theory about what is called modern monetary theory, which says in a very simple language, actually it doesn't matter how much your money supply increases, prices will remain stable. Actually, the relation between money supply and prices is a well-established, well-researched thing, one of the earliest things to have been done good research in the world. And Milton Friedman got Nobel Prize for proving this in his famous work on that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. So, so the theory was wrong. Then there was no sort of guidance or no internal guidance, maybe the monetary board, about what monetary policy we were following and in relation to what is happening in the rest of the world, about our exchange rate. When Mr. Cabral was governor during the earlier phase also, we had the same phenomenon where the exchange rate was not allowed to move and we lost reserves. So we have a similar scenario. We keep the exchange rate fixed, completely out of kilter of what is happening in the economy. Then you have reserves are lost, and now then we have to come to a policy where we have to go on begging other countries. Now we have very bad situation which self-created. So this is a condition that we have been. It's a domestic product. This economy is something that we have done to it. So the working back also would mean having good policy, reversing those things, realizing that the very important part of monetary policy to keep money supply increasing at a rate equal to GDP growth. Very simple ideas, but they are very powerful. And the second thing is that the type of people who are appointed, I see that in Dr. Nandalal Birsingh and Mr. Sriwardhan are very well practiced people who have held high positions in the bank. They have all our respect for this. So we are hoping that there will be change in the situation, starting from a very difficult situation today. Actually, as you said before, we are in a very tough situation. So we have to get ourselves out of the hole, so to speak. One last point. It's rendered more difficult by the political thing that is going on in the streets. So it's not an easy job to get up.
Dr. Rajapatrana, you've been attached to the central bank, as you correctly mentioned, for nearly 10 years. I want to reminisce your memory to the time that N.U. Jayawardena, the first Sri Lankan governor, took office in Sri Lanka as the governor of the central bank, and he spoke about the importance of ensuring that the leaders should be pressurized to an extent that they agree with the practices of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka as well as the Monetary Board. In this context, what is your opinion with regard to the conduct of Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe? What must he really try to achieve right now? Because we know the direction has been wrong. We know this is not the way the economy of the country should be handled. We are all aware that we are right now in a mess. We are in a deep plunge at the moment. In that situation, what is your opinion?
No, I think he has done the most brilliant thing that he could do. He has increased interest rate by 7%, 700 basis points. That's one of the best things he had done. There are armory of instruments in the central bank that will have to use to come out of this hole. And he has fired the first shot, and it's a very good thing. It's a sort of a signal to say we are very serious about these things. We are not going to go the old way. And so that action is a part of the macroeconomics that has to be put into place to allow the exchange rate not to start, going up and up. So,
Dr. Rajapathan, very quickly, I just want to ask you about the basis points as well. You say that increasing the interest rates by 700 basis points was the right step in the right direction. But don't you think that this should have been increased a little bit more? At least to approximately around 1,200 basis points?
Yeah, actually, yeah, we can't, after the event, I think we had to have a start, right? This is the highest increase in the interest rate in the history of the central bank, number one.
Right.
Number two, as you know, even still, because the given inflation rate, we have negative real interest rate at the moment, even with the 7% increase in the rate. So we'll have to adjust that, but that's one of the instruments. There are other instruments available to the central bank to keep the monetary situation under even keel, or to not allow the exchange rate to go jumping up and down. Because if you don't have proper monetary policy accompanied the interest rate increase that's been put in place.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Sarath Rajapathan, Academic Chair of the Advocate Institute. At least it seems like we are in the right direction, but only time will tell where the country will head in the next few weeks, in particularly in the next few months. I now move my attention to Dr. Anure Ekanayake, former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. Dr. Ekanayake, you've been on Face the Nation on many occasions. You've voiced your opinion. You've told the government as to what they should do. You sometimes went on to reprimand, at least advise the then governor with regard to what he should do to resurrect the country's economy. But all what you said before was not heeded. And today we are in this mess because of ill-advised monetary board members who were serving the Central Bank of Sri Lanka at that time, and because of the fact that the government's arrogance with regard to taking decisions. But Dr. Ekanayake, sourcing funds domestically today, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa addressing the nation seems like another eyewash in terms of how the public view it. But seems like it was another eyewash. The Prime Minister was going on or stressing the fact that how sourcing funds domestically in a situation like the last year's budget came into play. He was trying to cushion that argument. He was saying that that was the right way to do things. But do you think that even the Prime Minister's speech today made any sense to the business community at large? Did it give the right signals?
Shamir, to start with, I must confess that I didn't have time to listen to the Prime Minister's speech, which I will do tomorrow and study. But if you say that domestically sourcing money, by that he implied that printing money was the right thing to do, then we are in big trouble. Yeah. Because from what both Dr. Vijayawardena and Dr. Rajapathan told us, we recognize there seems to be a movement towards the right direction, which would not only be raising interest rates sharply, policy rate sharply, but also stopping, printing money, increasing money supply the way we have been. So, if domestically sourcing funds meant that printing money was okay, then it looks like the authorities have not learned a lesson, even though as all of us had predicted and cautioned the government, the inflation rate officially is now 17–18%, but many analysts choose different baskets of goods and say effectively it is more than 50% right now. And we have this international analyst also pointing out that Sri Lanka has the highest rate of inflation. It's all that is primarily because of money printing and associated policies. So if we have not learned a lesson from there, then we are in serious trouble. See, the most important thing is for the government to acknowledge publicly that certain policy measures taken, policy stances adopted in the last 2 years were wrong. And that is why we are in this predicament today. Now, without doing it, allowing a few individuals, including the governor of the central bank, however important he is, to say a few things implying that there have been mistakes is not good enough. If you want to correct the path, then the first step is to acknowledge that these were mistakes. We are now going in a new direction.
But in the new governor's defense, Dr. Ekanaika, he had accepted that his predecessor was in the wrong direction in terms of the country's economy, and he wishes to arrest the situation and not speak about the past, but speak about the future actions that need to be taken. What do you think about this?
No, that is, I thought it was a very good statement. But governor of the central bank, however high his position is still an official. It is up to the government formally to make that statement and say in which direction the government is planning to go. It's wide open at the moment. Apart from floating the exchange rate, moving the interest rate sharply up, and going to IMF to negotiate a package of program, nothing else. There is no public statement on a plan of action, a complete plan of action on how we are to get out of this predicament. And that's the problem. Acknowledge where we went wrong, number one, and then we have to tell the public what the government plans to do. Because at the moment, going to IMF is like a magic wand, right? The picture created is we go to IMF, we ask for some money, and we get it, and everything will be fine from that day onwards, right? And we also have here statements made saying, wait for a few more days, everything will be hunky-dory. I mean, that's not how things are going to happen.
Dr. Ekanaika, interestingly, the Sri Lankan political culture is such, you don't know what is happening. You heard the Prime Minister because you were not privy to the address that the Prime Minister made. The Prime Minister took a complete U-turn to the fertilizer ban that was imposed by his brother, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. He said that the subsidy would be given once again to the farmers who are in need of fertilizer to apply for their crops. We've just heard two members of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party have now supported the current regime in power as well because of ministerial positions. What are we hearing, Dr. Ekanaika? All these negative signals are burning in the stomachs of the young population in this country. They are wondering as to what is happening. I'm 100% sure, Dr. Ekanayake, this probably would be the burning issue to the private sector in Sri Lanka as well. What is next? What does the future hold?
Absolutely, because to plan anything, to do an investment, leave alone investments right now, to plan the business for the next 2-3 months, let alone 1 full year, you need to have some degree of certainty with regard to the macro variables. What is the exchange rate going to be? What is the inflation rate is going to be? What is the interest rate going to be? These are things which should be predictable. A degree of certainty is required. Without that, you can't plan, right? Because see, what people have to realize is businesses have supply chains, and the supply chains don't work on an incremental basis. They are lumpy. So when you order something, say for example raw materials, right? You got to, if you want to get scale efficiency, you got to order a very large volume. Then when you order the large volume, you need to know on the day it lands here in Sri Lanka at the port to clear it, at what rate you should pay. And all that is not known. What rate you should pay, at what rate you could get facilities from the banks. Everything is unknown at the moment. And matters are made worse by different politicians talking of different things at cross purposes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ekanayake. I just wish we can teach a good lesson to these politicians who take U-turns and who say things out of turn at times, putting not only you and I in limbo, but the entire country's economy in limbo. I now move my attention to Mr. Chandra Jayaratne, former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. Ms. Jayaratne, nice to have you on the show after a very long time as well, just alongside with Dr. Vijayawardena, Dr. Rajapatrana, Dr. Ekanayake, as well as Felix Fernando. Ms. Jayaratne, when you look at the conduct of the government now, it seems to those who are watching it, they are waiting, praying hard for a miracle to happen. Do you think that miracle will happen if the government does not take proper action?
Well, thank you for the invitation today, Shamir and Face the Nation and MTV. I don't know about the miracle. I'm one of those who are very pessimistic that whatever good things that are seen do not gel in a foundation sufficient to build a future which can be relied upon. It's like the government or the president is sitting on a pedestal and he's inviting everybody to come down to his feet and do as he says and support to get out of the country's present difficulties. As you mentioned a while ago, there is no apology from anybody, and to say we made a mistake with our economic and social structure management in this country, and therefore expecting some people to come, and this stool on which he's sitting has 4 legs. I think there are 2 legs which seem to have been strengthened. One, taking a few good decisions and starting with some few good people who seem to understand the situation and are capable of taking this country's economic path somewhat on a correct step. And probably he's got his political structure within the party to ensure that he has a sufficient majority in parliament, because the 41 people who went independent appears to be sitting on a fence and maybe with him. So that's 2 legs. So there are 2 other legs. I think the business people are also very happy that these two things have happened, and they have said, oh, everything will be hunky-dory, like the same way the President and the Prime Minister is saying. Today's Prime Minister's statement definitely says that there is no change. And why I say the no change will lead to a collapse is because they are not focusing on the other two legs. One, which is the people on the street or the citizens of this country. They must join, they must learn from the words of wisdom from our leaders that there is a future, that they will deliver a future, and invite them. And to do that, you have to apologize for all your mistakes and ask them for their support. You can't stay away from that. Secondly, you have to have a political stability. Political stability does not seem to be there because of the fact that there is no give or take. The opposition also has its demands. There should have been a negotiated settlement whereby we got a political settlement. Then the four legs are standing. And in the earlier leg, effective communications, buy-in through the media. All I can see is media, what is showing is that young people have already made up their minds. So I think I'm pessimistic that whatever the good policies that are hoped to be followed, the world is looking at us. They would not be happy to trade, invest, and even lend money to us if there is social instability and political instability.
So, Ms. Jayaratne, you spoke about 41 members in Parliament staying independent. Two of them, Priyanka Jayaratne has now taken over as the State Minister of the portfolio that he was commanding before, and Shanta Bandara took over the portfolio that was handled by Shashendra Rajapaksa prior to him departing from that portfolio. That puts the number at now 39. Political tug-of-war continues to take place in the political fora in Sri Lanka. What is the message it sends to the business community at large, Mr. Jayaratne?
Well, the business community appeared from the messages I got 3 days ago that they were very happy with what was happening because of these appointments, the need to go, the debt restructure will take place, financial advisor and the legal advisor will be appointed, and that specifically that the opposition has missed this bus by not joining the hands and putting this country right, because when they come to power, they will have a country which is free of economic strain. But I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
I think that as long as the egos and the same blinding that they took some blind decisions remain. Even the Prime Minister today assuring that they are going to give a subsidy. I don't know, I heard a farmer saying that the price of a bag of fertilizer is 42,000. So if they're going to give it 1,500 or 3,500, can the government afford 39,000 rupees subsidy on a bag of fertilizer?
And now there's
all the talk that before the new year they would be given compensation, that has not been paid.
Thank you very much.
I can't see this bringing any positive results because I don't think people have changed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chandra Jayaratne, former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. Fortunately or unfortunately, we now don't have the former governor of the central bank, Dr. Ajit Niwad Cabral, to print money and give to buy these fertilizer in question as well, Mr. Jayaratne, unfortunately. And then you spoke about the opposition's role as well. We'll delve a little bit more on that as the show goes along, as well as the domestic banking sector as well. I want to now move my attention to Felix Fernando, Deputy Chairman of the Joint Apparel Association Forum of Sri Lanka. I'm very sorry, Felix, for getting your title wrong right at the outset, but I presume I made it right now. Felix Fernando, Deputy Chairman of the Joint Apparel Association Forum of Sri Lanka. Felix, interestingly, my first question to you is about the apparel sector in Sri Lanka. We saw a recent article that made headlines on social media recently stating that because of the current economic crisis in Sri Lanka, many importers of apparels are now moving towards India. How far is this claim true?
Yeah, thank you, Shamil. If you have noticed that January of this year, we have recorded the highest exports, apparel exports for the last 5-6 years. So we had a huge trend. We have started, growing our industry, and we are planning to get into about 6 billion. But what happened was, like with this power and the diesel problem started, then there are a lot of problems associated with that, especially the SME sector. Some of them didn't have the generator power, and also some of them they had the generators, but with the small capacities, they couldn't get the diesel properly. Large players, some or other, they managed, but that doesn't mean that they also had to spend a lot of time and a lot of money to get these run their factories. But comes now most of the factories are closed for the April vacation, April New Year holidays. We aren't sure when we go back to work on Monday whether the factories will have enough diesel or whether we'll get the power to run the factories. We have seen that we have anyway for the next 3 to 4 months we have the confirmed orders, so that's not going to be an issue. What you said is true, because it's a competition, it's market economy, and all these buyers, they want to make sure that they get the uninterrupted goods, and goods, basically our garments, without any issue, because they have a market out there. And generally we have seen after the COVID, we have seen the market for the apparel worldwide has increased. And we were really benefiting that, and that's one of the main reasons that we were able to even forecast for the export turnover of 6 billion this year. And I'm sure that if these problems doesn't affect us, I'm sure that we are able to reach that target, and we should be able to reach our 2025 target of 8 billion as well. But like you correctly said, I'm not sure right now if any buyers are going to India, but we know some of the competitor countries, some of the people who are in the same industry, they are trying to. Of course, they wanted to increase, they want to use this as an opportunity. It's true, I mean, it's natural, because when China was having a problem some time back, Sri Lanka was expecting a lot of orders, whatever coming out from China. So we can't blame anyone, we had to blame us.
Felix, are you worried about the diesel situation in Sri Lanka? Because we are all aware that the $500 million given by India to import fuel to Sri Lanka is now fast depleting. When I saw the numbers last week, it stood at $290 million have already been spent on the Indian credit line. So we are now left with approximately 210, which probably would be enough for us to survive until the end of this month, probably the beginning of next month. If that case be the problem at hand right now, do you think, Felix, that we are in a mess at the moment in terms of supplying electricity to the factories who are exporting goods, or even in the manufacturing sector in Sri Lanka? Does that worry you?
Certainly, yes. But I would say, but as an industry, as exporters, we are also trying alternatives where we are able to get the diesel. So even, Shamil, I'll share this with you. About a month back, or about a few weeks back, our industry also, as an association, we were taking the lead to change dollars to rupees to help the treasury to pay for the diesel shipments. I know large industrialists, especially from our apparel industry, and together with the JAF, we have been helping. But we can't keep on doing this one, because we also don't have that dollars, that we don't have the luxury also to keep on changing. And so we have approached, some of the industries, we are going to the these bunkers, like John Keys or whatever, that may be for the generators. That's not the same diesel, the bunkering oil, but that is a good substitute for the generators. Then also that we have been talking to the Indian Oil Company, and they also have agreed to provide in bulk, but we'll have to pay about 3 weeks in advance. Ceylon Petroleum Corporation also have come up with a suggestion that we have to pay 2 months in advance, and they will supply in dollars. All these people that they need us to make the payments in dollars. But we can't really trust on the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation, because some of the people who have paid this, they still have got only one load of diesel, one Bowser load of diesel. So I think, I'm not sure that, I hope the Indian oil deal will come through. Like you correctly said, I also have spoken personally to the PUCL chair, and he also said maybe most probably that credit line, the diesel from that Indian credit line will be sufficient only till end of the month.
So Felix, I happen to, my full-time job is heading an export operation for one of the conglomerates in Sri Lanka. And when I reached out to one of the private agencies to get some diesel to run our operations, because we are an export company, this particular bunkering firm told me that the diesel should be bought at $1.5 per liter of diesel, whereas the liter of diesel in the market right now is 178. So they're trying to make a quick buck as well. Don't you think so? Is this fair? Isn't this all selfish moves to just fill up their pockets in a situation like this?
Shamil, that like what I told you earlier, in the bunkering companies, it's not the same diesel. It's a substitute for diesel. And also Indian Oil Company, if you have to buy, you have to pay at a higher rate. One of the reasons is, that they are not getting the subsidy the Sri Lankan government is offering to the petroleum corporation. So alternatively, we have to understand that they will not want to sell at a loss. So the more they sell, they'll be making their loss higher. The loss will become higher. So I think, it's excused.
Thank you very much, Felix Fernando, Deputy Chairman of the Joint Apparel Association Forum of Sri Lanka. Today I'm only left with Deshan Gonavala. The person who was supposed to come has fallen sick, and I don't think he or she would turn up anytime soon. So today I'm only left with you, Deshan.
I'm hoping you're happy about that.
I am. Indeed I am. Right. So Deshan is all yours.
Thank you very much. I think I want to start off with Dr. Ekanayaka. Dr. Ekanayaka, in the current context, following the advent of the 70s and the situation that transpired back then, this is probably the most challenging time in terms of companies facing in terms of carrying out their operations. Particularly in a context where more than ever, you need these companies to be operating at an optimal level to contribute towards the economy. In terms of something that the former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe said in Parliament a few weeks ago rather, was that by June you will see a lot of the companies shut shop. From your experience and from your network within the Chamber of Commerce and beyond, how much of a risk is there of this happening? And obviously the repercussions of this include potentially job losses and things that go far more into a social crisis as well. But how real is the risk of this happening?
There's a real risk out there, I must say. Now, to give a value to that, give a timeline to that is extremely difficult, because we simply don't know many things. For example, if you talk about the foreign exchange availability situation, people tend to focus primarily on reserves, and people still say at least the central bank weekly report, latest one shows that we still have about $1.7 billion of reserves. But there are questions as to whether those reserves are actually usable reserves or not, and that also as at end of March. But what people don't focus on is the net foreign assets, and net foreign assets of the central bank is now about minus $3.6 billion, right?
Minus.
Minus, negative. And then if you simply look at last year's balance of payments, the current account, the deficit, we still have published numbers only up to September, but if you make a reasonable projection to the end of the year, we would have been in deficit anywhere between $3 billion to $4 billion.
Dr. Ekanaika, I just want to correct these numbers properly. So you are saying that right now our foreign reserves is at a minus.
Our net foreign assets are a minus figure, and it's a big minus figure. It's about $3.6 billion. I think Dr. Vijayawardena might be able to correct if I'm wrong.
Right.
And
how much do we have in liquid cash at the moment?
We don't know. I mean, there are conjectures. Some people say it is almost zero. I saw this morning Dr. Vijayawardena himself suggesting that it is around $200 million. I've heard a figure of $500 million. But this is because we do not have up-to-date information in the public domain, which is a major responsibility of the authorities to make sure that the information is available. My answer to the question here is, I don't get any degree of comfort from the numbers which are floating around in terms of swap facilities, certain bilateral loans, that we are going to be able to sort out the problem so that the essential inputs for business will be available in the open market on time, in full. Now, you see the type of arrangements what our friend Mr. Fernando spoke about a little while ago, they all increase transaction costs. They all increase financing costs. They all increase uncertainty as to whether you will get what you want on time, in full. So what I'm saying, if I may complete just the number story, we all know that in the current calendar year, debt service was going to be about $6.9 billion.
Approximately 7 billion.
Yes, let's say 7 billion. Now the shortfall on the current account of the balance of payments would be anywhere between $3 to $5 billion because the petroleum costs have gone up sharply. Also wheat, sugar, all of those prices are going up. But let's say a conservative $3 billion. So 3.3 plus 7 is $10 billion we are short, right? And then look at the negative foreign asset situation, which is $3.6 billion. So 13.6, right? I may be off by $2 billion perhaps. Now this is a huge magnitude, and there is no one can take any degree of comfort from the bilateral arrangements, swaps plus loans, which are currently being spoken of.
So,
further to that is even when the Honorable Finance Minister speaks of a $3 billion bridging loan,
from the IMF,
it's still a pittance compared to the total deficit.
And this is for a period of 3 years. He's requesting from the IMF $3 billion US for a period of 3 years. So, given the fact, Dr. Ekanaika, what you're suggesting at 13.6 billion, the 3 billion that we're talking about is nothing.
It's nothing. So this is why it is so difficult to imagine that the prevailing shortages, see, energy is the key thing, but it's coming from dollar shortages, right? Shortages of dollar. So that, remember, Sri Lankan, like all over the world nowadays, all industries and businesses are value adding industries and businesses to different levels.
Right.
The highly dependent on imports. Apart from the plantation industry in Sri Lanka, every other industry, every other business is import dependent. So when if you don't have foreign currency, they are going to run half capacity, or even, so shutdowns. Now I must add the other big problem to that. While sharp correction in the interest rate was required in order to tame reduce the wild fluctuations of the current foreign exchange rate and inflation, it hits highly leveraged local businesses extremely hard. See, 12 months ago, the policy interest rate of the central bank was 5%. Today is 14.5%.
Yeah.
Threefold increase. Now imagine if the businesses have to pay banks in the form of interest 3 times what they were paying last year, when the demand has reduced, markets are
How is the
smaller,
private sector going to survive?
turnover is low.
Yeah.
So so a lot of people are going to find it very difficult.
Yeah. So Dr. Wijewardena, I just want to pick your brain on the numbers that Dr. Ekanayak was talking about before. How much do we really have in the kitty at the moment, Dr. Wijewardena? How much of money is left now? Dr. Wijewardena?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Dr. Wijewardena. Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah.
How much of money are we
Okay.
left with now at the moment?
Well, of course, the central bank has published these data of foreign reserves of the country by making an error in the accounting, because it has added the 10 billion yuan swap facility, which Sri Lanka had got from China as a part of Sri Lanka's foreign reserves, which is not the correct procedure. Because the 10 billion can be used only for the purpose of importing goods from China. Because when we add something to our foreign reserves, Samir, those foreign reserves should be available to us for general purposes and not just to buy goods from a particular country.
Dr. Wijewardena,
So
very
when you-
quickly, Dr. Wijewardena, if I may interrupt you for a second here, I'll let you continue with what you're saying. But now we're talking about the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, which have learned professionals, accountants, chartered accountants, doctors who have gone to London, who've got the means to study because of the grants that are being given by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Are you trying to tell me, Dr. Wijewardena, these set of individuals have made an accounting error with the most important accounting that has to be done on the foreign reserves of the country?
Well, Samir, this relates to economic accounting and not this financial accounting you are talking about. When it comes to economic accounting, what we use is the amount of foreign resource available for Sri Lanka for our general purposes. General purposes mean we must be able to buy goods and services from any country in the world. But this yuan facility that has been given to Sri Lanka is available only for Sri Lanka to buy goods from China, which is actually, in the terminology of the classification of foreign reserves, it's a trade credit. It's not. It doesn't allow Sri Lanka to say repay even the loans which Sri Lanka had borrowed from China, because those loans had been denominated in US dollars and not in yuan. So the central bank had made the mistake of, I don't know why they have done it. Probably, I think, they have too many accountants to
May not be a mistake.
put the account. So it may be the reason. But that's the wrong way. I mean, that's the wrong way. And when we take out this 1.6 billion US dollar worth of swap facility from China, actual foreign reserves as at the end of March was about, say, 124 million US dollars. So
Dr. Wijewardena, So Dr. Wijewardena, we heard several days ago that the central bank announcing that our reserves was at 1.9 billion US dollars. So this is all a farce. We don't have this money.
We don't have. Because actually, no, I mean, what has happened, Samir, is that out of this 1.9 billion, 29 million, is our gold reserve. In fact, there had been another sale of gold during the month of March. About half a ton has been sold, and now the balance available with the central banks about half a ton of gold. That's why 29 million value. And on top of that, our position with the IMF, that's going to be withdrawn by us. So when we take that out, the foreign exchange position is 1.7 billion. And out of that, when we take out the 1.6 billion, the available foreign reserves as at the end of March happened to be around, say, 124 million. But right now, it is much less than that. So what Dr. Ekanaika had, presented here to us, he's very pessimistic and he's scared about the present situation. It's perfectly correct. And about this negative foreign reserves, Samir, this is a development that Sri Lanka had from May 2021. All of a sudden, central bank foreign assets became negative because central bank had been borrowing heavily from outside and using the existing foreign reserves for making various type of payments. So as a result, from May this year onwards, our foreign reserves have becoming negative month after month, and the latest data available is only with respect to the end of February, and end of February it has been about 3.6 billion negative. What it means is central bank foreign liabilities are about, say, 5.5 billion foreign liabilities. I mean, central bank has no way of repaying those loans. If, for example, suppose the ACU, Asian Clearing Union, is asking the central bank to make the payment of this 900 million US dollars due to ACU. Central bank doesn't have money. If China is asking us to repay the SOP facility, we don't have 1.6 billion. If India is asking us to reverse the SOP facility, we don't have 500 million. If Bangladesh asks us to repay it, we don't have 150 million. So this is a very critical situation which Nandalal is facing, and we have to actually support him to build up the existing foreign reserve position so that the central bank can restart its operation from a very comfortable level.
Dr. Wijewardena, very quickly before I move to Dr. Sarath Rajapatirana, very quickly, with regard to the foreign reserves that we have in Sri Lanka at the moment, which is really dragging us down, why didn't the new governor of the central bank make any mention about these figures, saying that we are going at a deficit at the moment, we are in a dire situation at the moment, we need to build these foreign reserves? There was no mention about it at all at the press conference that was held on Friday. I'm trying to wonder.
No, he doesn't have to give up.
I'm trying to wonder what is he trying to do.
In his first press briefing, Samir, he didn't give us figures, but he said that we are actually not having the amount of foreign reserves sufficient for us to support the Sri Lanka. He had mentioned about it.
Right. So, Dr. Rajpatirana, give me a second, Deshan. Dr. Rajapatirana, now interestingly, you heard Dr. Ekanaika's thoughts, you heard Dr. Wijewardena's thoughts, who both very clearly articulated that the current situation in the country is very, very bleak. We don't even have medicine in the country at the moment, and we are really facing the brunt of all this. If someone is to be held accountable and responsible to this situation, Dr. Rajapatirana, no one can shy away. We are in this current predicament because of the officials who are there, because of the politicians who have taken us there. If you are to find out the perpetrators behind this economic massacre in Sri Lanka, if I may name it like that, who should be held responsible?
I'll start with the voters. Yeah, they are responsible as voters, okay? Not
But
all.
the voters are
No,
doing
what
their
I'm
part.
saying,
They are now on the street.
No, I'm going to go.
They are saying 225 have to go, and along with Gota home as well.
I'm just saying, as I said at the very beginning, this is a self-made crisis. It is a crisis that we are sort of was moving towards this from the beginning, not listening to people who were saying, you can't do this, you can't print money like this, which has some consequence. You cannot, I have a particularly difficulty with the swap arrangement, because swaps are seen by, in the past, or recent past, as an alternative to the IMF. Oh, we don't need IMF, we can, swap facilities have really very bad characteristics of them. The easiest one is to say that, as Dr. Vijayawardene pointed, you can't pay for money from swaps from the Chinese to somebody else, because you can only get Chinese imports. That's one thing.
No, but
I don't. Let me just finish that point.
No, a very direct question.
Yeah.
Very direct question to you. Who is responsible?
But, so I want to say about, we have been futzing around, going around, doing swaps and all that. When if we went to the IMF 1.5 years ago, we won't be in this predicament. You know, we accelerated this slide by not doing this, by saying, no, we have swaps. See, swaps are not transparent instruments. Somebody goes to say to the Chinese and say, look, we need to borrow money from you. It is a quid pro quo. We don't know what is being given in exchange. There is no delegation going there. There is the work of 1 or 2 people. These are very dangerous things. And besides all that, that is not a way of dealing with our problem. Swaps only.
Now, Rajavardhan, you are being very careful today.
Yeah.
Now, I'm asking you a very direct question as to who is responsible. You are beating around the bush.
No, I'm not. You can mention the names of 3 or 4 governors. You can mention the ministers of finance. All have involved in it.
My second question to you on the same subject is, Dr. Rajapathrana, the former governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, who introduced his ISPs to Sri Lanka in 2007 or 2008, who could not predict that Greece was falling and going to go bankrupt, and invested the public's money on Greek bonds. How can you expect a governor like that to hold office in Sri Lanka as the governor of the central bank to decide about the country's future?
No.
Was our leaders blind?
No, with the hindsight, we can be very smart. Okay? with the hindsight. When Vijayawardene did it in 2007, it done with a very good motive. We want to get our creditworthiness rated internationally, so that in the future we won't be here if we didn't have that. He arranged a new way of getting money from the markets, because when we are doing well, as that's the case, it was after him, 2007. So nobody can predict. You can't find fault with me, for example, saying you didn't know the Greek debt was going to go down the toilet, right? We don't know that. No, but that thing that he did was badly mishandled by the people who came after him. I'm sure Dr. Vijayawardene will be much more able to deal with that issue that you have raised than myself, because he was there throughout.
Dr. Rajapathrana, in the midst of this, looking forward once again, there's a big talk about this $1 billion bond that needs to be repaid somewhere in July.
Yeah.
But particularly in the case of the new finance minister, before he resigned for the first time after taking office, he mentioned something very interesting that unfortunately the former finance minister didn't reveal, particularly because he wasn't in parliament for 3 months. He said there is a few $100 million or $200 million payments that need to be settled before the point at which we need to settle the $1 billion bond, because there are interest payments. Now, given the context that Dr. Vijayawardene gave to us over the course of this discussion, we don't seem to have the money necessary to make those interest payments. What kind of impact will the failure to make those payments have in the lead up to us potentially not being able to pay the bond in July also? Will life get more difficult? What kind of impacts can the general public
life is definitely going to get more difficult. you have to pay. Yeah? Our credit rating is tanking again, then number one. Then there are sort of a private sector operations that private sector will be very badly because they can't give in assurance we will be able to pay. Nobody will give us, already nobody is giving us credit. We have no access to the credit markets anymore. So it's going to be a very tough day. Then the things will fall off. As you say, we won't be able to import the imported inputs, particularly because we have this new system of value adding. So we are going to be, that will have consequence for the growth rate, that will have consequence for employment, that will have consequence for people. Can you imagine people can be worse off than now? They are going to work out than now.
Mr. Fernando, in this context, I think you might be able to give us a good idea on what this means, particularly for the apparel sector and industries beyond that as well. The apparel sector has been looked at for the last so many decades as the beacon of light for the Sri Lankan economy, as one of the key avenues through which foreign exchange tends to come into this country. Given this context, how feasible is it that Sri Lanka's apparel sector can continue to flourish, and how realistic is the threat that countries in the region that are also having growing apparel sectors can potentially woo away our clients and potentially also, by virtue of that, put us in a bigger hole than we already are in?
Yeah, let me answer that question starting from what this gentleman mentioned. It's true, because what happens is it's a supply chain. So we need to get a lot of imports, and the bad news is already certain airline companies or certain shipping lines, they have reduced the operations to Sri Lanka because they aren't sure tomorrow whether they will be able to get the money from the Sri Lankan customers. So similarly, if we are going to miss some of these even interest payments, or like we call disorderly default, if we get into a situation, a disorderly default, then what happens? That no foreign bank will accept our banks, whatever the promises or whatever. Then where are we going to get our imports? Imports are not only coming from China. Okay, it's true that a lot of fabric we import from China, but it comes from many parts of the world. Plus, it's not only the apparel, but there are certain other industries also, depending from the imports what we are getting to Sri Lanka. So that the trust, the confidence, it's not only from the buyers, our customers, they will look at that. They will not only worry about the current situation there, that we don't have diesel, so the production gets delayed, and it's not only that they are going to look at it. They are also going to look at the whole supply chain, whether Sri Lanka will be in a position to get the materials on time. Even if the materials get on time and we get on time and we'll able to produce, whether we'll be able to ship, whether it's air freight or whether it's sea freight, on time, because these are, especially in apparel, is fashion. You have to give. I mean, we have to give on time. If not, they'll lose a lot of the quantities that they have ordered, because they will not be able to sell. If their competitors will take the market. So, under this condition, like what you said also, if this condition prevails, if there's no permanent solution, even let's say maybe someone said that the central bank, we are very happy that the new governor has come, so they have appointed, including the former governor Indrajit Kumaraswamy, to go and talk to the IMF. So we are seeing the good signs. But if there is no political stability in the country, do you think IMF also will keep on helping us? No, they will point to us and say, no, first you sort out this the country's stability, political stability first, that if you want to continue the aids for you. And this
just like in the case of Pakistan, when Pakistan went to the IMF for help, IMF suggested that they first of all sort out the domestic political crisis, and only then will they support. So right now Sri Lanka is also in a political crisis at the moment, Felix, don't you think so?
Yeah, of course, I mean, maybe, I don't know, I don't know whom to be blamed, everyone to be blamed, but see, there is no political will also at the moment, to sort out this issue. And if we continue like this, we think minimum 25 to 30% of the revenue from the apparel exports will be reduced.
Felix, you're looking at to blame someone, right? I'll tell you who to blame, the 225 members in parliament.
Shamir, if I may, I also, taking from what Mr. Fernando mentioned and also some of the inputs by the other panelists, Dr. Vijayawardhan, if you can hear me, something I personally have been researching quite a bit that has a very scary kind of reality to it, that is hitting very close to home now, is the potential crisis that we can endure in the future, which is very similar to what Lebanon is going through at the moment. If you look at just the telltale signs, they had the queues for fuel, they had the long power cuts, they had the political parties bickering in parliament. Even in Sri Lanka, you see in the midst of all this, they have taken 10 days off to celebrate Aurudu, so there's clearly no will. What I see is a very close example to what is going on here, except that Lebanon has fallen so far that many young people there in particular really see no hope. How realistic is the possibility, or how real is the possibility that Sri Lanka can potentially fall into a hole similar to that of Lebanon?
Well, if you look at the one good indicator is this the market price of the bond, which is to mature on 25th of July this year. Friday, the market price was $57 per $100 bond. This evening, it has fallen to $50 per $100 bond, and the yield rate has increased dramatically, and you may not even believe it, 1,020% interest rate. I think that must be the highest interest paid, bond available in the world. 1,020 this afternoon. That is because there are only sellers, no buyers. So what it means is the existing bondholders expect that the bond will be defaulted. So therefore they want to get out of the bond and sell them en masse, but there are no buyers. So as a result, price is falling day by day. Normally, if it is a good bond, by the time we approach the maturity date, the market price and the face value of the bond will have to be equal to each other. But in this case, we are actually moving away from the face value. As I told you, on Friday it was $57 and today it is 50, and I don't know how much it would be tomorrow. But what it means is that there are no takers. What it means is that the answer to your question, even though in Sri Lanka we have not felt it, the people outside have already observed and they have actually taken action to protect their assets.
Right. So there were a lot of investigations, committees that were appointed. Dr. Vijayawardhan, if you may recollect, committees that were appointed to look into the Pandora Papers. There were individuals who were appointed for that, but those committee reports are now swept under the carpet and no one is even talking about it. Ms. Jayaratna, we are talking about inflows of money right now because of the interest rates going up significantly. Do you think there is a danger for illicit money laundering activities taking place in Sri Lanka as a result of this current situation that we are facing at the moment?
No, you have to come here.
A current situation, let's leave aside. I have done a computation of what I think was the illicit financial flows out of this country in 2021, and normalizing some of the issues of connected with these remittances from people which are coming through Hawala or Undia systems, even normalizing them to an annualized basis, I get a figure of about $3 billion as an illicit financial flow out of this country. And to back my figures, there is a Global Financial Integrity has computed the same figures for the period up to 10 years ending in 2013. And there they have determined that the average illicit flows out of Sri Lanka is only is 1.997 billion or nearly 2 billion. and they have not taken some of the figures I'm saying because it's an illicit flow. If the interest on the income or the money that is stolen and is stacked somewhere, the interest earnings are going again into that country. That's a flow out of Sri Lanka legitimately in that particular year. If you take those things in, I think it's about 4 billion. If you compare, I'll give you the best examples of this. Russia under Yeltsin had, in 6 years, the amount of that illicit flows are estimated equal to its outstanding external debt. And similar, it has been in Bangladesh, has been in Nepal, and has been in several African countries. So therefore, this is not something that is uncommon, and I think that is one way to stop it, is to get illicit flows flowing out of Sri Lanka to be curtailed. So if we say, if it was even what it was before, 2 billion a year, over 10 years, is $20 billion has gone out of this country, and that is
25%.
what should have been in our reserves had it not gone. So, and what are we doing about it?
Who are
we are
behind?
doing nothing about it.
Yeah,
including there are presently indications to show that even the undial monies that were coming in, or the monies that were coming in through the informal sources may have had origins not out of Sri Lanka, but origins out of Sri Lanka itself. So, which means that there are people manipulating, and best example of this would be some of the investigations that have been done. Regrettably, all those files are not going to be opened, or open files are being closed. Yeah. I think it is time for the government to demonstrate its commitment to good governance. If they are going to do that, is to start going back to recover all the proceeds of crime which are lying outside Sri Lanka.
Ms. Jaratna, what I'm trying to figure out is, during the Mahinda Rajapaksa government, they went ahead and opened a state bank in Seychelles. What was the ultimate objective of this move? Because we're talking about money laundering, outflow of money from Sri Lanka. What was the reason behind this?
That particular question you asked, I have to refrain under Section 17 bindings I have from revealing, because I have seen the files, I've been a part of that investigation, so I'm not privileged to talk about the Seychelles operation or to anybody else.
Right, okay. Thanks a lot, Mr. Jaratna, for your thoughts on money laundering activities. But let me rephrase that question a little bit more then, for the benefit of our viewers, because you can't highlight the content of the operations at Seychelles. Tell me, Mr. Jaratna, you speak about $4 billion going out of the country. You say over the last few years, last 10 years, the amount goes up to $20 billion, which are staggering numbers. Who is responsible behind this? If you look at it, the Rajapaksa government has been in power since 2005 to 2015. In the last 4 years, we had the Yahapana regime also in power. In the last 3 years, we've had the Gotabaya Rajapaksa administration in power as well. So who has taken the money out?
Well, who has taken the money out can be found, publicly quoted ones. I may be able to speak. Why is there no investigation being done on the publicly announced Sri Lankan Airlines scam, where we are aware of $2 million going away? It's in a court case. There are several other court cases overseas relating to Sri Lanka, which gives indications that there is monies outside.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Jaratna. I want to quickly speak to Dr. Anureka Nayaka with regard to the inflation that you spoke about. Today, this morning, Dr. Ekanayaka, when I went through the tweets that came across on my Twitter feed, one of the economists, very celebrated economists, puts Sri Lanka's inflation at 68%.
Right.
And then he goes on to say that the option right now for Sri Lanka is to have a currency board, as we experienced between 1884 and 1950 in the country. So do you think the currency board concept is an option? Because we see currency boards being established in Antigua, Argentina, which have gone on default, and so on and so forth. So do you think the currency board is the option for us at the moment?
Let me put it this way. The difference between currency board and a central bank is primarily about printing money, right? So with legal, if necessary, constitutional restraints imposed on the central bank, I think the difference between a central bank and a currency board can be narrowed. So certainly looking at currency board operation and then figuring out what is suitable for Sri Lanka is a good way to start the process. I would not commit straight away right now without doing that, that it's good to go on a currency board route, because it puts the available policy options for a government in a kind of a straitjacket. That's the issue. But
Dr. Rajapathan, yes.
I gave the Professor H.S. Gunasekar lecture in 1968 in Apparel with the title Between Currency Board and a Central Bank. So I reviewed, because Dr. Gunasekar's thesis 1962 was from dependent country to central bank. So I did a lot of work in that area. I think it's a published paper now. So the thing is that I'll just give from one number and then go to the others. There's an IMF study of currency boards in 39 countries about, say, 25-30 years ago. There are only 9 remaining, and those 9 are very small countries, some having GDP of population of 70,000 people. Okay, number one. Number two is that there's a technical point, and I ask your permission to say it. That is that if a currency board were to work, the exchange rate is fixed, perpetuity. You can't change the exchange rate. There is no independent monetary policy. The whole thing goes on autopilot. So if there's a very close relationship between your foreign asset, for reserves if you like, and the money supply. So it could be 1-to-1, it could be one fixed proportion. The result is the same. So are we prepared to handle, can we go into a currency board this situation? And my answer is no, not now, because we are in a terrible other problem, that who is going to rescue us to get our numbers right in order to start a currency board, number one. All the numbers that we talked about up to now, the loans we are outstanding, the thing the money has to be paid, bring to a sort of a standstill in order to start a currency board. There are of course countries that did well, Lithuania and those countries have done well, because of special circumstances. And the last point, that's the technical point, is that when you have a fixed exchange rate and there's no monetary, independent monetary, independent money authority, no. When you have a fixed exchange rate and there is no lender of last resort, is the best way to put it, then we are in a very dangerous ground in a situation like this. I won't, like Dr. Andra, I won't exclude currency board, but I'm saying that's not the instrument for us to get out.
Yeah, but Dr. Rajapathan, you spoke about several countries. You spoke about Lithuania, but I want to add to this list with your permission. There is Antigua, Barbuda, Argentina, Bosnia, Brunei, Darussalam, Bulgaria, Djibouti, Dominica, Estonia, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Lithuania, Hong Kong, and also Grenada. All these
out of all these, there are 9
countries-
remaining.
Yeah.
Okay, 9 remaining.
Yeah.
They are in very small countries.
Okay.
So as a country, sometimes I think Navy has 70,000 people or something.
Right.
So, my point is that let that be for a minute. Is that we are in a tremendous financial crisis, and we might be confusing the hell out of the people to say now we are going to currency board. That is the problem.
Right. We are trying to find answers, Dr. Rajpatrina, so that's what we are trying to do here at Face the Nation. We've been doing this for over the years. I want to speak to Dr. Vijayawardena. Dr. Vijayawardena, are you there?
Yes.
Dr. Vijayawardena, now, I want to drag your attention to one of the articles that you wrote in 2012 June. You speak about the domestic economy-based economic policy is not the way forward for Sri Lanka. I read this article with a lot of interest, and you went on to say that this has been the policy of the Mahinda Rajapaksa administration since 2005, and it has not worked for Sri Lanka. But today, when I heard President Mahinda Rajapaksa addressing the nation, he touches on this yet again. Why isn't this the best way forward for the country?
Well, Samir, for more than 4,000 years, Sri Lanka had got its wealth, prosperity and income by getting integrated to the rest of the world and through international trade. So we have to actually count on the ability of Sri Lanka to produce and sell to the rest of the world to generate income and wealth for Sri Lanka. So that had been the practice by Sri Lankan kings, for many centuries. So all of a sudden, what happened was the Mahinda Rajapaksa administration from 2005 onwards thought that Sri Lanka can develop itself by concentrating on developing the domestic economy and producing only for the domestic economy. So as a result, the exports actually began to decline in terms of the GDP, and the ratio had fallen from around, say, 26% in 2005 to 15% in 2010, and then to 13% in 2019, and now it is around, say, 12%. So the whole economic issue that we are facing today is because of the negligence of the export sector by Sri Lankan policymakers. So that is why it didn't work during the previous Mahinda Rajapaksa administration, and it did work during the Yahapalana administration, and also it doesn't work now during the Gotabaya Rajapaksa administration, and you are aware of the economic crisis that we are facing today because of the same reason.
Dr. Vijayawardena, now we speak of Dr. Indrajit Kumar Swamy to be one of the good brains or intellectuals who steered the country's central bank for a period of time. But even he, in your opinion, did he try to arrest the situation when he was the governor of the central bank?
Well, I think, Samir, you have misunderstood the role of the central bank. Because the central bank deals with the monetary sector, the financial sector. The financial sector is just an imagination in your head. For example, you may be having, say, 1 billion rupees in your say fixed deposit account, and tomorrow if the bank fails, that will be gone. What matters is the real sector. The real sector adjustment has to be done by the government, not by the central bank. Central bank's job is to create the conditions conducive for the real sector to take off. So what Kumarasamy did was he was trying to bring the macroeconomic stability to Sri Lanka, which was disturbed by his successor, Governor Lakshman, by going for this spurious modern monetary theory, and after that it was exacerbated by Governor Cabral. So now it is up to Nandalal Veerasinghe to bring the stability in the macroeconomic sector so that you will be able to build up your house on the stability that you have on the ground level.
So, Dr. Vijayawardena,
because the real sector development doesn't come from the central bank.
Right. So,
it
Dr.
comes
Vijayawardena,
from the action of the government.
Yeah. So, Dr. Vijayawardena, on the 18th of April this month, a few days from now, the Minister of Finance, Ali Sabri, is to visit Washington to have a round of discussions with the IMF. How long before will we start seeing some concrete results after this particular meeting in question?
Well, Sabir, I think you can, fast track the entire operation now because you see there are three things in my mind because there are certain preconditions which we have to meet if we want to speak to IMF. In fact, those conditions have already been laid down by the staff which visited Sri Lanka in December for the purpose of this Article 4 consultations. And they are very clear, and what they say is that the government will have to increase revenue by increasing the income tax and value-added tax and also going for quality taxes. What it means is that the government should actually go back to the tax system which had prevailed in Sri Lanka prior to 2019 and should not rely on the type of taxes like this surcharge taxes which are not sustainable and which are not repeatable also. Number two is that the government, they have asked the central bank to tighten monetary policy, which Nandalal Virsing has already started. Then to float the currency, which of course, started by Cabral, but now Nandalal Virsing will have to take it forward. And finally, one important factor which they have highlighted is that the central bank's independence should be established. Now, for that purpose, there is a bill that had been gazetted during this Yahapalana government, which had been actually drafted by a committee headed by Nandalal Veerasinghe, and it was about to be presented to Parliament. But of course, what happened was, unfortunately, the government fell and the new administration didn't want to take it up. So it has been shelved. So Nandalal Veerasinghe will have to get the Gotabaya Rajapaksa administration to get it back to Parliament and have it enacted before we speak to IMF. And at the same time, IMF has asked Sri Lanka to start the debt restructuring program. And after we complete those two, the IMF will actually listen to us. But all the three actions, Samir, can be started simultaneously.
Right. So
you have to wait until one is over.
Right. So, Dr. Ekanayake, how realistic would all this be? Dr. Vijayawardena points out there are three major concern areas, in his opinion, with regard to going to the IMF. But how realistic would all this be quickly to take us out of this rut at the moment?
Shamir, it's about how can the ordinary people absorb the corrections. What is the speed at which the correction can be brought about? That's the key. Take energy prices, right? The Article 4 consultation report, the latest one, also mentions that market-based pricing of fuel is a requirement. Energy, all fuels, including electricity, energy. Now, in a situation where inflation can be as high as 60%, as you mentioned, the US economist has calculated. The local number says close to 20 now. Even governor says over the coming months it can hit 30%, 28% or something.
28%.
Right? So, in such a situation, imagine if like floating of the currency and like doubling the policy rate, if overnight government was to set the diesel price, petrol price, kerosene price, gas price and electricity tariff to market base, what's going to happen? You know, the numbers of people who are standing out there in the Gulf face would increase tenfold, hundredfold. Because people just can't bear it. So you see, that's the reforms have to be spaced or phased out in a manner where the general public, who are already under enormous difficulties, can absorb it. If not, what's going to happen? You know, there's anarchy. There'll be anarchy on the streets, right? So, this requires very skillful and sensitive management of a reform agenda. So the negotiators with the IMF will have to be armed with a plan for making these corrections. They are required, okay, but can they be absorbed? That's the key, right?
Yeah. Yes, Dr. Rajwala.
Yeah, you know, I think the economists can agree that there are certain unpleasant things to be done in order to get the economy back to the keel. It's not going to be easy, as Dr. Ekanayake has said. And actually, when you have a discussion with IMF, then you can say these are our difficulties, and the discussion that will be take place is going to be a reasonable one. So they say, now this is what we want to do with electricity, and our side can say, no, we can't go at this pace. And most of the time there will be agreement on that table on that, okay? Because they understand, because they have also done this all over the place, right? And these are professionals, and true, they also made mistakes, as human beings make mistakes. But I think that those things that is in Article 4 are eminently reasonable. Eminently reasonable. Only to the proviso that Dr. Ekanayake said, let's talk about the rate at which we can do it. But we cannot get away by not doing it. That is the point.
Dr. Rajapatran, along the same lines, I think another question that needs to be asked and needs to be answered also is that there is a politics involved with this, fortunately or unfortunately. There are election cycles, and every election cycle, the needs of the people tends to change. In an ideal world, what you'd see is the reforms laid out, people subscribing to the reforms so that in 10 years life is going to get better, but that's simply not how it works. Particularly in a Sri Lankan context, where you see election cycles leading to a stark difference in the policies that have been followed. How realistic is it that once we get through this immediate IMF program that we are negotiating at the moment, given that we have had 16 in the past also, that as things tend to get better, as things tend to stabilize over the next 3 years or so, that along with the people's frustrations that you've seen in another number of other countries that have gone through IMF programs, that we don't have a kickback towards more handouts, so to speak, particularly on a political level. How realistic is it that we can pull through?
Every economic decision today in the world, or it was in the past also, but we didn't notice, is going to be closely related to politics. What can be done? And the politicians are the ones who we elect, are supposed to be clever enough to understand the rate that the government, the people will accept. Having said that, I'd say we know many countries in the world. Don't bring the IMF, let's say there's no IMF. There are people, sensible people who can run these things, follow the same principles as economists do and get out. I know one case in Latin America, the debt to GDP ratio was 900%. Okay? Within 2.5 years, they are back to normal, right? And there was IMF program, not so much the IMF program, but the people realized that that was not the way, that they are not they are not going to go anywhere without dealing the case like this.
Again, so, in the importance of establishing optimism, but not optimism to the level that we will be too optimistic and potentially get our hopes dashed. I think I want to also raise a statement made by the former Prime Minister, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, in an interview he gave with a leading media institution. He said that we can stabilize the current situation within about 2 years. I think the question that a lot of people who are on the streets, particularly young people coming from my generation, is how long does it take to stabilize the current status, and how long is it until we get to normalcy? By normalcy, I mean fuel when you want it, electricity when you want it, things like that.
Yeah, you see, there is, first of all, it's going to be difficult, first of all. Second thing is very difficult to say when difficult to say, as Dr. Vijayawardena has mentioned to us, when the IMF program will really start. We are still we are not in a discussion even, number one. Two, then we come to the question you raised, what is the pace we can do it, right? And then ultimately the finest thing we need is political leadership of a sensible set of people who can run this country. We haven't arrived there in a long time. Okay, so
sensible people running this country. That, of course, Dr. Rajpatrana, wishful thinking. Do you think there are sensible people running the country?
I think there are sensible people in Sri Lanka like in other countries.
No, there are sensible people in Sri Lanka. There is no question about it.
Yeah.
But do you think the political hierarchy now in Sri Lanka are sensible?
I am not at all suggesting that.
I think we are thankful that the IMF doesn't have it as a precondition that you need to have sensibility.
No, they can never have that actually. No, they are very careful. They can never have that requirement. They can't have that requirement.
Right.
They can't say we don't like it face. No, we can't do that. I mean, they don't do that either.
Felix, interestingly, the private sector recently having a media briefing went on to say that they may lose $50 million per day, and they say that around 30% from the export revenue from this month onwards would see a sharp decline. How is it going to affect the country's already bad state of foreign reserves?
I think it's very simple. Because like maybe this particular media briefing you mentioned, it happened with all the goods and service exporters, which brings about roughly about 16 to 17 billion US dollars. Yeah. So out of that, if you are talking about 30% revenue drop, is I think here I have the esteemed very good economist here. I think the reserves definitely is going to hit a big issue, because the problem is multiple. A lot of capacity, idle capacity due to the power failures or lack of energy, diesel. Then maybe there could be also, if the inflation continues like this, we don't know. I mean, we have to understand, even as businessmen or whatever, that we need the employees. They need to have they need to be able to bear their cost expenses. Yeah. So if there are going to be some work uprising or whatever, what's going to happen? So they need to live. It's reasonable that they need to get a living wage. If someone says inflation is about 68%, or even the new governor is predicting it will reach to about 28-30%, are the private sector, are they in a position to give these increments? Probably maybe some of the exporters, yes, but it's not only the exporters. You are not able to.
Cost go up though.
Yeah, if the cost will go up, how can we compete now? The countries, our competitor countries, they will take this as a huge, opportunity, because nothing is perfect. On top of that, the costs are also rising up. They don't know whether we will be able to deliver on time, all sort of things. So definitely, I'm sure that we are asking for the trouble.
Yeah, but Felix, now even the private sector, we've seen the manner in which how much of pressure could be exerted by the private sector in Sri Lanka, because they are the engine of growth in any country. Do you think the private sector is doing enough?
I was also privy to certain meetings with the higher ups. We know how much we have told, like the economists also. We have been telling, private sector also have been telling in various forums, even directly to the highest authorities in this country. Please do this. If you don't do this now, if you don't act now, these will be the repercussions. It was, like playing violin to the deaf elephants. I'm not sure why it wasn't heard. At least, now we see something is happening, but I don't know. It's too late.
Now the private sector is suggesting that the Prime Minister and the rest of the MPs need to come up with a solution within a week before the economy collapses completely. Are you satisfied with the speech made by the Prime Minister today?
I'm sorry, Shamin, I was also not privy to listen to that speech. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I couldn't.
Because the speech was telecasted at approximately around 7:15, so because of the show being at around 9:30, you all wouldn't have been able to listen to the speech in full. But do you think making speeches shooting in the dark, Felix, is the way forward for Sri Lanka. We don't want to know what happened 12 years ago with regard to the war. That is done and dusted. That is history. We have to now talk about the future, shouldn't we?
True enough. I mean, we can't always, boast on the past glory or whatever. We need to have a real concrete plan, like we have in Sri Lanka. Very good intelligent people, sensible people. We need to get the best from there, and maybe need to sort out, come up with some policies, which will last for the next at least next 10-15 years. So one of the problems what you've been having also indirectly was we were not getting enough investments for the last few years, because no one wanted to, even before this dollar crisis or energy crisis came up. Why? Because we didn't have a conducive, friendly environment to invest, foreigners to come. Now I represent a foreign investor. Now they have sent a mail today. Oh, thank you, Felix. This is about the surcharge taxes.
Yeah.
You are influencing. You are really pushing for the investors to move out from the country. I do have the email. So this is not the way. Why not? Rather than trying to for that moment, to get some mileage from the general public, for the voting public, why don't someone, why don't these political authorities in Sri Lanka, maybe that's what I think all the people at the Gulf race.
But this surcharge, Felix, this surcharge, even the opposition consented to it. Now, not only the government, in Parliament, even it went without a vote.
Yeah,
because even the opposition parliamentarians consented to it.
Yeah, because even during their government, they did it.
All of them. It's very simple.
We can laugh on it, Shamil, but
the package shuffled all the time, but the jokers, of course, remain in their own places, right, Felix?
Correct. Because it's really not a laughing matter. Because it's really something to that. It's an instance that we need to really cry. We are throwing away all the investors.
Investors.
Not only the prospective investors, even the people who have invested here so far.
So, Mr. Jayaratne, if I can pick your brain on managing the local banking and the financial system and the impact of it to SMEs as well as the citizens, how is the current situation going to affect the banking sector and the financial system in the country?
Thank you for raising it, Shamir. It's something that is not talked about by very many people, but something that worries me more than some of the other problems, because if the haircuts are applied to the ISBs and all all those for external loans, many of them are held by the local banks. Now, the second question is, some of the banks, local banks, are heavily exposed to some of these SOEs whose existence as a
Ms. Jayaratne, we just lost you. Let me get back to you when the connection is good. I just hope there is no power cut. Because of that, there are instances in which connectivity is not properly established. We can hear.
I think it's muted.
Ms. Jayaratne, we can hear you again. Can you repeat yourself? Because for the last 10 to 15 seconds, we couldn't hear you.
No, so what I was saying is that if the banks hold a lot of money in the form of ISBs. Now, if the ISBs take a haircut, the banks will lose that money. That's number one. Second is the banks have borrowed foreign currency and lent it to the government of Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Now, those are recoverable, and but I mean, okay, in books it might be, but what is the real worth of that bank? Third, the amount of SOEs or the state enterprises which are in debt or having guarantees through the banks. fourth one is the moratoriums that were given during the COVID period is going to come to an end, and this year's balance sheets of the banks are going to be judged on the quality of the loan book based on without that moratorium effect on it. So I feel that the banking sector is going to be really affected one way or the other, and they will have to recapitalize. At the same time, the high interest rates that will attract some of the depositors or some consumption to go into deposits, which is a good thing. The banks will get that funds and that will help the economy, inflation will be down, all those good things will happen. But the bank's loan book, can they grow it? Can they grow a loan book at what Anura called 3 times what people have been the cost structures are going to be totally different. So only those with adaptability, creativity and flexibility will survive. A large number of industries could go down because of the high interest rate. Especially we are aware of large companies itself who are making a lot of money, having very large leveraged balance sheets. They had a good time in the past, but that might not end. So I really worry even to talk about these things, because if there's a run on the banks, on top of what we are having, I can't see us even coming out of where we are. So I think there is a concentrated, focused attention required of the state, the regulators, the private sector, and those in government to focus upon as to how they get out of this crisis. That it's not only an external crisis, there's an internal crisis, and it will become extremely difficult, very especially if the haircut is imposed upon the treasury bills and treasury holdings, which will impact the savings of people and very especially the savings of the pensions and provident funds.
Dr. Vijayawardena, now, right now as we speak, Dr. Ekanaik also mentioned about this before, taming the inflation is one of the biggest challenges that the new governor of the central bank and even the Treasury Secretary should take note of. Then I just want to drag your attention, if you may recollect, Dr. Vijayawardena, several weeks ago, there was really strong measures taken by the governor of the central bank, Ajit Niwad Cabral, on the thriving black market in terms of foreign exchange. How do you think that Dr. Nandalal needs to battle this problem out? Because the thriving black market has led to many problems as well, the Undial, the Hawala system, so on and so forth. How can he battle it out?
Well, Shamir, the existence of a black market for foreign currency is the worst enemy which a central bank can have. So naturally, you have to eliminate the black market. But the elimination of the black market, the correct strategy that you have to adopt is you have to adopt the market approach instead of using the punitive laws against the black marketeers. Because it doesn't work, because I had been working in the central bank, during the time Dr. Sarath Rajpathan had been there. And we know the difficulty of curtailing the black market at that time, because when we adopt one measure, there are several hundred of measures strategies which they would adopt in order to counter. So Nandalal Veerasinghe will have to tame the black market by using the foreign exchange rate. As I told you, now this happened in year 2001 when S. Jayawardena first floated the currency, Sri Lanka rupee in year 2001. What he did was he actually went above the black market rate, so that the black market didn't have any incentive to get those, dollars through the black market. And the rupee dollar rate immediately shot from rupees 80 per US dollar to 98 per US dollar. But when the IMF made the statement that it would approve of the floating and it would stand by Sri Lanka, everybody knew that the governor was very serious. So as a result, the money started flowing back to Sri Lanka, not through the black market, but through the formal banking institutions, and the rupee started depreciating and finally settled around 88 rupees. So what Nandalal should do right now, Shamir, is the adoption of the same procedure. In order to go for that procedure, he has already, taken action to increase the interest rates. Now, Sarath Rajapaksa said that this was the highest increase in interest. No. The highest increase on the interest was done by S. Javadan in year 2000, December 2000, prior to floating. He increased the bank rate from 16% to 25% by 900 basis points. So he did that in order to curtail the operation of the black market, and eventually it paid dividends, and as a result the rupee was stabilized around 88 rupees per US dollar. Now the same strategy had to be adopted by Nandalal also, because he increased the central bank's lending rate from 7.5% to 14.5%, but today he has done another shock treatment to the economy by increasing the 1-year treasury bill rate to 23%. From 15% to 23%, around say 800 basis points increase in the treasury bill rate. So what it means is that he's actually trying to kill it through the market mechanism rather than by using the non-working rules or regulations or laws.
Dr. Vijayawardena, it's very clear that you have a lot of high regard for Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe and also Deputy Governor, the Treasury Secretary who's right now. But credible reports are coming in, Dr. Vijayawardena, that the central bank today printed 3.31 billion rupees during the last 24 hours. What is he trying to do now?
No, what has happened is that in the case of the treasury bill auction, Samir, even though they have increased the 1-year treasury bill rate to 23%, they have not been able to get the entirety of the money that they had expected through the auction. So as a result, out of the amount, there was a shortfall of some, say, 9 billion Sri Lanka rupees, and that had to be funded by the government, by the central bank. But what it means is that even this 23% is on the market equilibrium interest rate as far as the savers are concerned. So it has to go up further. And finally, when we reach the level at which the demand and supply factors are, equalized, at that stage, we can start thinking of the stabilization of the currency.
Right. So, Dr. Ekanayake, interestingly, right now, the last 3 days in Sri Lanka, right opposite the president's office, we've seen continuous protests being launched by members of the public, mostly the young generation, the young population of the country. And most of these individuals are not driven by any political agenda. They're coming with one voice saying that they want reform, they want the president to go home, they want political stability in Sri Lanka, and they want a new revival as far as the country's economy is concerned. What is your message for the government in power, Dr. Ekanayake? There is so much of agitation that are taking place. What is the message you have for them?
Listen to them.
So what is the next option?
Listen to them and ask what we can do, because those young people who are out there are the future of this nation. And what is the choice we are giving to them? To remain here, contribute to the nation and build this nation, or leave as quickly as possible, right? And so listening and then asking, okay, what have we done wrong? Acknowledge them and correct them, but also tell them very clearly, this is what we are thinking of doing. What are your thoughts? Can we, Can you contribute to improve? You know, keep a dialogue going, right? It's not about, see, we are gone are the days, long gone are the days where people expected the king to know the answer to every question, right? Today is the world of internet, right? Distributed pools of knowledge, experience, interacting with each other to produce solutions to the problem. So the whole approach has to change. It has to become a consultative approach where, you know, a lot of listening, saying what we want to do, listen to the people, get their reactions, modify, get them on board. You can't have this thing of the government deciding on its own what it wants to do. It has to carry the people along with them.
But how do you view the role of the opposition, Dr. Ekanayaga? Because the opposition is very steadfast, saying that if they are to join an interim government and govern the country, the 20th Amendment of the Constitution needs to be repealed and the 19th Amendment of the Constitution has to come to the center stage. The opposition is also looking at moving an impeachment to oust the president, like in the case of Pakistan. So do you think even the intentions of the opposition is very clear on this?
See, I've taken the trouble of studying the history of debt crisis, hard and soft defaults, and what has happened in the political system. One strong message you get when you do that is, during times like this, there's a rapid change of governments. There's a rapid change of governments. It's inevitable. Because, you know, there is no willingness, there aren't enough forums for different people with different ideologies, different thought processes, different priorities to discuss, share, right, and then pick out what is suitable for them. When that doesn't happen, conflict is inevitable. And so political parties, the way they are behaving now, is nothing new. That's how it has panned out all over the world in such a situation.
But when you hear what the members of the general public are now saying, Dr. Ekanayaga, they don't want any member. They don't want any of the 225 members. They particularly don't want the president to be there, but they also don't want the 225 members as well.
Correct.
For those who are agitating right now, what is your message to them? Keep the pressure on, or what is it?
Certainly keep the pressure on. That's the number one, because that's the only way to get a reform agenda to be adopted and come into play. Right?
What makes you think, sorry to interrupt, that they will listen to us?
I didn't get you.
What makes you think that they will listen to us?
Who will listen to?
The people on the street. Who are you? You know.
People, intellectual crowd, Dr. Rajapatrina, time and time again, on Face the Nation, from the messages that we receive, we all very well know that they right now want a systemic change in the country. They want to make sure that the country is on the right track. Whether or not the government in power is going to listen to us, I don't know. But during the last few months, last few years, Newsfirst as a channel has always been with the people, hearing their voice and being with them, no matter what. That is the best we can do as a media network. And it's up to the people and the political hierarchies in Sri Lanka to decide as to where they want to steer the country. So having said that, we're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's the final round. We give each speaker 2 minutes, uninterrupted 2 minutes, to give their final thoughts on the way forward for Sri Lanka. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is economy in limbo. Are we waiting for a miracle to happen? Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. We will be right back.
COVID-19 සඳහා ආරක්ෂිත පියවර නිතරම හොඳින් සබන් යොදා දෑත් සෝදන්න. සබන් හෝ විසබීජ නාශක මධ්‍යසාරයක් භාවිතා කර දෑත් පිරිසිදු කරන්න. සැම විටම අන් අය සමග මීටරයක දුරස්ථභාවයක් පවත්වා ගන්න. හැකි සෑම විටම නිවසේ රැඳී සිටින්න. නිරතුරුවම නිවැරදිව මුඛාවරණ පළඳින්න.
Supporting rural education means building a nation's future. And together with the people of Sri Lanka, Gammadda is leading from the front. Development of preschools in Ramba Ava and Isin Basagama, both in rural Anuradhapura. A preschool developed in Attan Kadavala in the North Central Province. Clean drinking water for the children of the Maligattin School in Valimata, Bandarvela. A library for the youngsters at the Kumbakoya Rural School between rural Polonnaruwa and Matale. Clean water for school children in Hambegamua, Munragala. Classrooms for students at the primary school in Ralapanava, Anuradhapura. The complete development of the Sindati Mata School in Kalpitiya, Puttalam. These are a few examples of Gammadda's action and impact. Thanks to you, the people. Gammadda. By the people, for the people.
Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We start off the final round with Felix Fernando, Deputy Chairman of the Joint Apparel Association Forum of Sri Lanka. Your final thoughts.
Shamil, thank you. We know that we have been listening to all these points what had been discussed. However, it's sad what we are seeing today. In spite of that, we hope that we will be able to find some solution as an industry, business community, that we have been talking to not only to the government but also opposition. We have been requesting to meet as well as the opposition leaders also to see what from our side what we are able to do to bring a political stability to the country. And we know that with all these problems, we are as an industry we are trying our level best to not to lose any customers as well as suppliers. Keep all the supply chain with difficulties, I know, with difficulties, but maybe not to lose any of those customers, so even the suppliers, because we understand all are important for us to achieve the goals, because we know at this moment when you are having a problem of the reserves, if we going to lose another 30%, we all know the impact it will give to the Sri Lankan economy, so we can't take that shock. So from the apparel industry point of view, we would like to make sure that we'll end of the year we'll still try to get that 6 billion export turnover that we were targeting, but it's not going to be easy. We have seen that January, February and hopefully March also we've been having growth in the turnover. We expect please both the government and the opposition to think about the country first and leave the petty politics aside. I don't know whether this will be listened or not, but that's my wish, and hope the country will back to normal sooner.
Thank you very much, Felix Fernando, Deputy Chairman of the Joint Apparel Association Forum of Sri Lanka. I now move my attention to Dr. Sarath Rajapatrina, Academic Chair, Advocate Institute.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and we have had a very interesting discussion. There are certain obvious things that we have to deal with. The most obvious one is how to stabilize the economy. And I think the first shot taken by the central bank, raising the interest rate, is with 7%. I didn't realize that AS did higher in the past. That's the basic thing, but it has been followed by other things on the macroeconomic side. If we have to raise revenue and at a rate that people will accept, but you know, we had at one stage one of the lowest revenues to GDP ratios in the world at 8%. Yeah. So we have to think, but the revenue thing in Sri Lanka is very unfair. Poor people are paying taxes because indirect taxes are 80% and the other 20% are income taxes and taxes that are not taxes that generally in the hands of the rich people are paying less as a proportion, and poor people are paying more. We talk about it for a long time, but we have not done anything to correct it. Now, a crisis also is a turn to get things done. Somebody said, "Don't waste a good crisis."
Yeah.
So, there are certain things we can do. For example, to sell the revenue part of it. That's one we can do. Second thing is that we have to slow down the demand. The ultimate solution to inflation is slowing down demand and removing the constraints on supply. Those simple things that will work, and many countries who are in our predicament have been able to get out of it. Finally, I think that I am worried about growth. Even to repay our tax debt, we have to grow, right? Nobody talks about growth. It's not in the agenda of anybody. It's true that we have to deal with it. There are certain things we can do concurrently while we are fixing the stabilization part of it. Obvious things that like what they can do to the exporters. Other thing to do is the very silly thing that we have been doing. We think that promoting exports is by itself. But you cannot promote exports without having a free trade import policy. You can't control all the imports and say, now we can only grow export. That doesn't work. And we know from world history in the last 30, 40 years, and very good studies done by leading universities and economists in the world, that this import substitution model doesn't work. It has never worked anywhere. So we have to do, when we liberalize, in other words, allowing prices to allocate resources, we have to think about both sides, not only one side.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarath Rajapatrina, Academic Chair, Advocate Institute. I now move my attention to Mr. Chandra Jayaratna, former Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce.
Shamir, a while ago you asked a question, or you were asked a question as to who will listen to you. I think it's time for us to listen to, and the government to listen to some of the issues that the protesters are saying. I think if you take, there are two clear messages that I have seen. The first is they want social stability and growth of the of the people. So you can't think of things which are outside of that. You have to satisfy the young people that they have an opportunity tomorrow, and towards that some things must be done. From education to livelihoods, to skills, to housing, to infrastructure, to everything else, they must pay attention whilst doing this to satisfy that. The second and very clear one, which was not mentioned by you, Shamir, is that they all want the stolen money to be returned. Now, I think the government must demonstrate that they are listening to that at least. All the files that were closed, all the cases that were withdrawn, all the cases in which the Attorney General has gone and said there is no evidence or somebody else has said something, And I will give you one other thing. There are hundreds of very useful, what is called STRs, suspicious transaction reports. If you add those suspicious transaction reports and investigate, I think you can get at least half of the illicit financial flows out of this country. So I think those two aspects, look at the socio-economic rights of the people in the longer term, do something about it, and listen to the second request. That is what they are asking for, not just gas or some small things. They want a future in which they can live a livelihood which is useful. Number two, they are asking for the stolen assets. This is coming not only from the protesters, it's coming from protesters in the village area. Yeah. So that must be listened to and something must be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jayaratna, former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. Dr. Anurek Kanayaka, also a former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. What are your final thoughts?
Shamit, thank you for this opportunity. What I hear and what I get from what people say, particularly the protesters, not only in front of the President's office on the Golfways, but also in every town, in front of petrol sheds, in front of gas depots, along the farms, small farms, agricultural outposts. What are they? What is the underlying thing you hear from them? We don't trust. That's what they are saying. We don't trust the system. We don't trust the rulers. And now it has gone to the extent of saying we don't trust the opposition as well. Enormous trust deficit. How do you address that? Because even a genuine plan shared with the people will not be easily accepted if the people don't trust the system and the ruling elites, both on the side of the government and the opposition. So some start has to be made. How do you do? It can be designed in all sorts of ways, but just think of this. How about asking every MP to make a public declaration of their assets and income, both in Sri Lanka and overseas? Just think of that. Because currently the allegation is across the board that everyone has stolen money. We don't know whether it's true or not, but that's the perception among the people. So, without correcting that, it's going to be extremely difficult to go this journey of economic stabilization, which requires enormous sacrifices. And all over the world, the sacrifices have always been made more by the poor than the other. It's so sad, but that's the reality. Now, what would make the poor go along with those without protest? So I think that's where the penny has to drop. So the whole conversation has to start by saying we are leading by example. Demonstrate that we are leading by example. Tell them what they are planning to do. Listen to their suggestions. Walk the talk.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anurek Kanayaka, former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. I now move attention to Dr. W. Jayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, for joining us this evening as well. Your final remarks and your thoughts, Dr. Jayawardena.
Well, Samir, as a nation, we are going through the worst social, political and economic crisis in our history today. To get out of these crises, the multiple crises, it's not an easy task. And it will be a very painful journey for all of us in Sri Lankans. And we must be prepared for that. And my suggestion is that, across the board, from president to the man in the street, must be prepared to make the supreme sacrifice in the next 2 to 3 year time period in order to come out of the present crisis, and therefore we can again be proud as a single nation. So that particular message has to be delivered to us by the President and by the Prime Minister. Unfortunately, when I listened to the Prime Minister's speech today, I didn't get that message. So that is where we stand today, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. W. Vijayawardena. Thank you very much, Felix, Fernando, for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. Dr. Sarath Rajapatirana, Academic Chair at Vakala Institute. Dr. Untitled Chapter for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. It was a pleasure to have you three at the studios this evening. I should not forget Mr. Chandra Jayaratna, former chairman of the Sri Lanka Chamber of Commerce, and also Dr. W. Vijayawardena, former deputy governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, for joining us on Face the Nation tonight as well. Dr. Vijayawardena, you've been very silent, did not see you for some time on Face the Nation, so it's a pleasure to have you back on track, at least on Zoom, to discuss about the current state of affairs in the country. Thank you very much, Deshan, for joining us this evening on the show. It was a pleasure to have you on board as well. I leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do. This morning when I was going through Twitter, I saw this quote and I thought it would be very apt for me to use this on a day like today. Be with a leader when he is right, stay with him when he is still right, but leave him when he is wrong. Take care and good night.